At 0800 hours, station time, the Romulan Empire formally declared war against the Dominion.
Sisko, right here, is making a confession. Starfleet officer, spit polish, the best human beings that we essentially can visualize. He is making a confession here to his computer. Essentially, Sisko has just did something that got the Romulan Empire into a war. When we think of war, we're thinking in terms of our planet, countries going at it, taking down one another. But this is war on a different scale. This is technology that is wildly outside of our typical idea of what technology and how destructive it can be, being used to the ends of destroying worlds, not just countries. Billions of people are dying. The Federation is losing that war. And this is an organization that, for all intents and purposes, is rather cosmopolitan. All of these different groups, all of these different races, and if I'm not mistaken, there's not even a human being in charge of Earth. They're losing. They're going to lose. He knows he's going to lose. The metrics, the data, what they're looking at is getting across to him that they're going to lose. Their people are being slaughtered en masse, and they will be subjugated by a race that is not cosmopolitan in the least. And they will be folded into supporting a group called the Dominion. Sisko knows this. And despite his morality, despite all the things that he believes, the myths that he accrues around, like the other Starfleet officers accrue around, just like Earth accrues around, he knows they're going to lose. He takes an action, meaning bombs a ship and blames it on the Dominion, and does so in a way where he creates this crystal of sorts that puts the blame that the Dominion is going to attack the Romulan Empire. This, and what he's talking about, is that the Romulan Empire has just entered the war believing that it was the Dominion that bombed that ship, as opposed to Sisko working with Gareth to set that bomb. My question is this. If Sisko knows the Federation is going to lose the war, and if Sisko knows that that's a cosmopolitan organization, meaning all of these different races, groups, worlds, and everything else fit under this particular umbrella of freedom and democracy in the works, if he knows that's going to go away, and he knows that's going to go away for billions, potentially trillions of lives, and setting that bomb and blaming the Romulan Empire to get them involved into a war which will kill millions of them, maybe even billions of them also, is it right? Was Sisko right? In this confession here, was Sisko right? Sisko's morality is bugging him. This is honestly, In the Pale Moonlight is one of the best episodes of Star Trek in all of Star Trek. Because ultimately it's asking this basic question, not in this kind of brazen way that Discovery goes with. This took like 6 seasons before they even got to this point. All of this was built up until it got to this point of war. What does Star Trek morality looks like? Hefted against reality. Meaning your ideology is a poor substitute for reality. The ideology that these guys have, in one of the other episodes, they called it a cult. In that particular perspective of the world, his morality is bugging him. And as such, he's making this point of reality being hefted against ideology. Was Sisko right to set that bomb? Was Sisko right to blame the Romulans? And was Sisko right to do something that absolutely went against every notion of what Starfleet is about, in order to get the Romulan Empire into a war that the Federation was going to lose otherwise? Was Sisko right? In the Pale Moonlight, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, like, share, subscribe. Let's have a 420. We haven't had 420 in a while. And I'm sitting here looking at my sign called Be the Integrity. And for whatever reason, I started thinking about Sisko. And as opposed to waking my wife up, I have a channel, so let's talk about it in the context of the channel. The Pale Moonlight. Sisko is confronted with a war he's losing. Sisko is looking at notes. He's looking at the death toll, meaning the list of people who have died, officers on various worlds, not just one planet, various worlds that have died. And he's presented with the proposition of, hey, maybe we can do something about this. What if the Romulan Empire got into the war? What if the Romulan Empire sided with the Klingon Empire and the Federation in pushing back this particular group of the Dominion working with the Cardassians? What if, what if, what if? And how could I make that work? Sisko, head of Deep Space Nine, an instrumental place right at the border of this wormhole, is given this plan to, we can trick the Romulans into getting into the war by presenting a picture to them that the Dominion is planning to attack them. And that will bring them on our side. Now this plan goes awry, but there's a secondary plan that Garrett implements of bombing the ship to make it look like any defects in the crystal that they were using to get this across were part of the blowing up. In which case, the Romulan Empire, believing that the Dominion is about to attack them, sides with the Federation and raises all hell on Dominion outposts. Sisko is trying to reconcile that with the Starfleet morals. How can a Starfleet officer do such a thing? Billions of lives in the Romulan Empire is going to be lost over something that was an outright fabrication and a lie. And it's something that I was instrumental in bringing about. How can I reconcile this? How can I reconcile this? And in that moment, he doesn't reconcile it at all. What he comes to is ideology is a poor substitute for reality. And ultimately, if I had to do this over, I would do it again. And he deletes everything that he said in the entirety of this video before this episode goes off. Was Sisko right? If Sisko didn't do this, and trillions of lives are lost, and any notion of a cosmopolitan federation goes away, and the entirety of that particular segment, that area, gets essentially taken over by a fascist empire, would that be right? And if that wouldn't be right, does that automatically make what Sisko did here correct? By the same token, every notion and ideal that the Federation ascribes to is essentially trashed in this episode in order to get the Romulan Empire into the war. And Sisko doesn't go back and immediately say, well, wait a minute, to be fair, we did lie about this in order to get you guys. No, he doesn't say that at all. He allows this to take place. The seasons that take place from this point on take place with the Federation, the Klingon Empire, and the Romulan Empire fighting a war, with Sisko sitting there with these other groups, knowing that he lied to get that other group in. Fascinating. Now, my mom hates me when I make this argument, but I always tell her that there is no such thing as right and wrong. Right and wrong doesn't exist. And the myths that the Federation ascribes to are indeed just myths. Yes, they're good myths, but myths nonetheless. You need essentially an unreality, things that's not real, in order to get a large body of people to accrue around anything. Otherwise, everybody's doing their own thing. Everybody needs something to believe in and needs to do so in a collective way. Your laws are just the body of myths. They're not real. Your money, it's not real. Your government is not real. They can bomb the White House today. Your government is not going anywhere. It still exists. It exists because it's not a real thing in physical matter reality that we accrue around. Human beings are real. Things are real, meaning trucks, boats, cars. Yes. The myths are not. But the myths are necessary. If human beings didn't necessarily have this capacity to believe unreal things, how could those human beings accrue around anything? All of those people would be thinking of completely different things. And even in the sense of people in small tribes or whatnot, they themselves, yes, in a small group where everyone knows each other, can make that work. But how do you make 300 million people fall under one banner? How? I've never been to California. And yet if anything happened in California, my first thought would be we need to essentially help California Same thing with Texas. Don't particularly like Texas. Would be perfectly okay if Texas cedes from the Union. But by the same token, if they got hit with an earthquake, I would say all forces of the U.S. should assist, or all the powers that we have should assist Texas. United States of America. The government is not real. There are no real borders in real terms. And yet, we make those things real. Those myths are things that we accrue around. Those laws, the government, the fact that we fight in political sense is myths in action. I guess my point is this. Sisko and the ideals of the Federation are not real things, despite the fact that all of them fall under that particular banner of belief in saying, yes, we believe that these things are vitally important, that life, the ability for people to live the way that they want to live without the interference of others, we believe that's vitally important. And as we believe that is vitally important, that is going to be something we all accrue around. Great. Integrity is going to be something we all accrue around, because in a process, in a system that doesn't have integrity associated with it, it will fall apart and tear itself apart. That is something we accrue around. Great. All of those things. Great. And I agree with him. How does that reconcile with this? How? If Sisko, with those ideals of integrity, justice, honesty, sticks with those ideals, the Federation loses the war, and all of those ideals go away, because the group that is coming into power will not have those ideals. Right and wrong doesn't exist. It's relative and dependent upon what you believe in. I have a sign up here called Be the Integrity. And let's take that from Star Trek for the moment. Let's take it into real things. A person has a show. Let's say that person has 10 million listeners. Let's be ambitious. African American, likes to wear hats. Let's be ambitious. And he takes a strident point of view of sitting on a moon, looking at events and just calling it what it is. And he knows that he's a person, he's stuck in a cultural context, he has various experiences that takes him to a particular point of view, and he doesn't hide any of that stuff. And he puts all that stuff out for people to scrutinize and give their opinions on. But ultimately, all of that stuff has brought him to a particular political disposition that he gets across. And part of that is, I am not part of this party structure. I just want to be earnest and tell the public what is taking place. He may get it wrong, but at the very least, they accept that he's trying to be earnest and getting it across. And he believes that a guy that is about to take power is a monster, outright monster. And he has information that damages the candidate that he was supporting, who was going against that monster. He's the only one with the information. It will end the candidacy of the person that he's supporting. Does he put it out? Does he put it out? Say for the moment that monster was George Bush, and you knew that he was going to invade Iraq. You knew it was going to be massive havoc on a grand scale. And the other guy was not going to do that. The other guy was against that policy. But again, you had damaging information that you knew was going to end the candidacy of your guy. Do you put the information out? What's right? Is it right to stick with your ideals and the things that you've done for that particular channel for those years and say, look, this is what's true? And you know what's going to happen. Media is going to pick it up. It's going to run in stereo. And everything else that's good about the candidate will be washed away. And his candidacy will end. And that monster will win. And he will invade Iraq. And he will kill 1 million people. You don't know that as a flat fact, but you believe it, which makes it true, at least in the sense of how you're going to act. Or do you pull a Sisko and shut the fuck up and not release that information and let your candidate who is leading win and not wipe that 1 million people off the face of the earth? What's right? What's right? What's right? What's right? I'm fascinated with that question. People bitch at me because I give Trump rah-rah sometimes when he does something that I ideologically approve with. And their point is, he's a fucking monster, and you giving him a rah-rah is an assistance to him. People bitch at me, and particularly Dor, in 2016 when I didn't support Clinton. How can you not support her? That guy's a monster, and whatever her defects, at the very least, she's not him. The catch here is the situations are not entirely the same. I mean, ultimately, the Cedars of the world that has essentially said we'd vote for a D if it had a bowl of soup, if it had a D beside its name, I think has made our situation worse. We've gone from one president to the next, meaning looking at politics in specific sense, from election to election to election, misses that over the course of 20 years, you slid further and further and further in a particular direction because the Democratic Party has realized that you would vote for whoever they put up. It has worsened our situation, not made our situation better. So I think the situation is a bit different. My reasoning on those things have to do more so, I think it's politically worse for Clinton to win than for Trump to win. Especially from the context of politics, not in a specific sense, but over the course of 20, 30 years. Not to mention, nothing changes with Clinton, whereas at the very least, with Clinton losing, you can make an argument that these guys have failed across the board, and there needs to be a new ideological shift within the context of a party that up to this point has shown itself incapable of winning. Meaning any notion that we're the adults in the room, we know how to win, essentially goes away. And any political coalition that can be developed after that may be something that is a tick to the left to challenge the current Democrat hegemon. That argument can't be made with Clinton in office. That argument has been the argument that has been made over the last 3 years. But that doesn't mean that a situation won't develop where this becomes the question. I find this to be a fascinating question. And I gotta be honest, I don't entirely know the answer. My answer is almost a dodge. Right and wrong doesn't exist. Right and wrong is situational dependent. If Sisko believed that the thing that was the most important in that moment was, I need to win this war, my ideals matter less, then he chose the right answer. The problem and the conflict that Sisko is having is, in a deeply ingrained way, from the time he was born to right now, they have worked with this notion of truth, justice, integrity, honesty, etc., etc. And that is run roughshod against reality. The same thing is true for this particular channel, right? I mean, yes, I'm talking about my channel in this case. When faced with something like that, when you know, or at the very least strongly believe that somebody, let's say a Republican after Trump, that is utterly even more grotesque, and you know it, and you also know that the person who he's running against is absolutely entirely corrupt, what do you as a person do? Personally, I think Sisko is right. And I've said on more than one occasion that I am less moral, I remember, than sane progressive on this stuff. I accept that the beat of the integrity thing is entirely ideology. I accept it. I believe it firmly, in like flesh to bone, in the sense of running this channel in that particular way. And yet, I accept that me accepting that flesh to bone is entirely ideology. It's a program that I approve of because I think it's to some degree right. Especially if we're talking about having any notion of bringing politics back to this notion of reality. By the same token, because I accept that it's a program, I also accept that ideology is a poor substitute for reality. I haven't seen that situation, and God knows, I hope I don't necessarily have to be in that situation. But does Sisko really have trillions of lives on his conscience if he doesn't take this action? And is his integrity, does it matter that much? Meaning, is his integrity under Starfleet guidelines, is it more important than the trillions of lives that will be lost if Sisko doesn't take this action? Life matters more than ideology, right? And if life does matter more than ideology, then Sisko is right in taking this action. It is good that Sisko feels some kind of way about this, because it is a fucked up thing to do from the standpoint of a Starfleet officer. But the Starfleet officer stuff is not real. Those people are. That's kind of my point. Integrity spotless and let trillions of lives get lost, or does it matter to you more to protect those trillions of lives? It's a magnified situation, but the situation happens on a much lower way. That's my only point. I don't know how this got wrapped into breaking bones. Morality will grow and change as we do, yes. And it's specific to environmental factors. Understand what I'm saying. Your morality is entirely dependent upon the environmental factors. If your society, if we get hit by an asteroid, and at the exact same time there is a massive sunspot that wipes out technology, one country attacks because they think they can get something out of it because of the way the country has been destabilized. And let's say no country attacks. But what does your life look like at that point? Meaning, if your world falls apart, what does your life look like? When you have other people that doesn't have necessarily a structure, and you have gangs, you have groups that try to take power, the government to some degree dissolves or falls apart. What is morality in a world that looks that way? This notion of Medicare for all, fuck that. That doesn't exist. You'd be lucky if you could find a doctor. Let alone streets being updated, roads being updated, your physical safety being something of a given in a normal situation or normal sort of way. All that stuff goes away. If there is a wartime situation where your country and your government and world falls apart, you're being bombed and so forth, is it right to let your wife and kids starve as opposed to take the food from an older couple that you think is going to end up dying anyway? What's right? And do you really go back to your wife and kid and say, no, I didn't take the food from that couple because that couple needs to eat and it's the wrong thing to do, and your wife and kid starve? Or do you take the food? And that's a real situation, by the way. That's not an unreal situation. I mean, the wartime situations that were taking place in Germany, or for that matter, were taking place in like Poland and whatnot, those are horrendous situations that people had to endure and go through. And this notion of morality was different. Morality changes dependent upon environment. That's my only point. Your society being fabulously wealthy allows that society to essentially up what it believes is right from the standpoint of a typical human being. That becomes, we can cover healthcare. We can cover education. We can ensure that person lives a decent life as that person gets older. Those things are only allowed because the society has gotten to a point to allow them. The environmental factors has allowed that to take place. Just saying. Paul, BSO Gaming, it was once moral to shoot a man in Alabama if he steals your moonshine, right? Akira Immortal, everything subject is also objective. You want to save lives, occupy the media. We have a rare chance to effect change from within the system with Bernie. Yes, agreed. But the media is ignoring and cheating him. We can get him elected. Yes. Jamarl, the Buddhist feeds himself to the lion, my friend. That's his ideology. The ideology is not real. Him giving his life is. I hope you understand my point. I understand him feeding himself to the lion, but why, in any real terms, should a human being allow themselves to be eaten by a lion? Why? And you can say, well, there's a higher goal, there's a higher ideal, all this stuff. Fair enough. But let's just also accept that those are myths. Those ideals are just their ideas. That's not a real thing. The person who's given his life to be chewed up experiences, feels pain, is matter, that has a point of view, that has experience, and that experience is going to be a living hell when he gets eaten by a lion. Why on earth is that a good idea to do? And don't give me the ideals, give me real terms. I guess this is kind of my point. Ideology is a poor substitute for reality. It's not that the ideals that they are going by necessarily are wrong, not in the sense that this is how we have a better world. That part is probably true. It's more so that those are still ideals and reality is something different. And when those ideals meet head up with reality, Well, the question becomes, which one matters more? Depends on the situation, right? Spock, giving his life to save his captain, was probably a good choice. In other situations, maybe not. Just saying. Just saying. It's a fascinating question. I mean, there are more dilemmas, right? There are more dilemmas. All right, I'm going to end this because we're just fucking around. Laura Glenny, how is reality created? I'm going to put that you're asking that rhetorically. Who the fuck knows? I take it. It's just kind of a leap of faith that other people exist. And whether I believe other people existed or not, I can feel pain. And I am materially affected by the elements of this space. How it's created is less important, right? Supernatural has gotten on a really fucking fascinating trend in the show. God. They've added a character of God. Now, they've done this for a few seasons. And when they first added this, my thought was, in fact, even before they added the God character, the show was fascinating. Because even though these guys are out there hunting demons and everything else, the world that they're talking about, that they're creating, I mean, ultimately, what does it mean to be real? I mean, these guys are going on various dimensions, and what does it mean that they are various dimensions? I mean, be it a hell dimension, be it a God or heaven dimension, all this other stuff. What does it mean to have these various dimensions? And then the moment they say, well, look, there are other worlds and there are other realities. Well, what does it mean for them? Like, what are they? Excuse me. The larger questions, they never ask God. And I think the larger questions are more interesting. I understand they're fighting demons and all this other stuff, but it looks like there will be a moment where they would be like, what are we? God, you could be a piece of code on God's desk that he engages with every so often. Are you real in that sense? Now, I would say the fact that you experience and feel pain, you're real. All experiences are real. The fact that there is a God out there that created you and written you, the fact that you, again, experience and feel pain. Even if God says, look, your experiences and the pain that you feel is written into code per se, I don't know what that really matters from the standpoint of the thing that is experiencing those things. I mean, the catch here is that thing knows that it's when it dies, it's gone. That thing also knows that for the most part, God can bring you back and do pretty much whatever he wants to you, that you're essentially a plaything of something else. I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for the psyche of a person or a thing.